Hey everybody, how's it going? Today I've got a quick review of the Curtis Custom Knives F3. I picked this guy up in a trade for my Shirgorov 111 because I decided that the 111 was a little... Honestly, it wasn't even that too big, it was too big. I just realized that I wasn't a big fan of the full carbon fiber construction. I've said numerous times in my videos that I like knives with some heft, and even though it was a huge knife, and the weight was certainly representative of how big it was, it just, like, I don't know, it didn't feel super solid to me. So I put it up for trade, and long story short, I devaluated the knife a little bit by trying to undo the pivot, but it was stuck, and so I scratched up the pivot pretty good, so that lost a decent chunk of value. And I really wasn't interested in anything trade-wise besides one of these. I was hoping to get like a little bit of a cooler one, but I was happy with how this one is. So, with all of that out of the way, this is the Curtis Custom Knives F3. This is the medium variant. Dave Curtis has been making these knives for a while. This, like I said, this is the medium, so there's a smaller version. There's also a bigger version. He makes the Cruise, which is, I believe, around the same size as this, but it's much thinner and lower profile. It also has some like skeletization to reduce weight in at least some models that I've seen. I think one of the things that I think is really cool about Dave's knives is that he offers a ton of variations on his knives. So with the F3 medium, for example, this is just a full titanium construction. He has oval tack scales, which is the same, but they have milled sections, skeletonized, whatever you'd like to call it. He has done different milling styles of the handles. Obviously, this one has a flamed or torched pattern, which is done by just taking a handheld torch over the titanium. And well, this is just a random pattern, but you know, you can do patterns or whatever you like. But he has a lot of different options for handle materials and just appearance wise. So that's one thing that makes these knives really cool to me. Just real quick, while we have the clip pointed out, you can see the clip has a little crosshair on it, and that's Dave's logo right there. It's also on the blade, so it's cool. He's integrated his logo into the clip, which is something that other makers do, like Brown Knives. Greg Brown puts his logo on his pocket clips as well. Just a little bit, well, I don't know where I was going with that thought. Anyway, pop it open. You can see this is a Wharncliffe blade. He also offers kind of like a tanto style, and then also a drop point. It's more of a Japanese tanto, where it's not so much an angular change in the direction of the blade cut or of the blade shape. It's more of just kind of a general swoop, but there's like a very noticeable grind that denotes it as a tanto. So we got a Wharncliffe here. This one thing about this knife is that when I first opened it, for like 0.3 seconds I thought it was assisted, because the action is wild. The detent is pretty strong, not like overtly strong to where you have to really try to open the knife, but the strength of the detent coupled with how just the size of the flipper tab, and you know, the bigger the flipper tab is, the more leverage you'll have, which makes it easier to open the blade. And so those two things combined just make this knife have a ridiculously snappy action. It's so satisfying. The closing action, not so great, but I haven't taken this guy apart. I haven't cleaned him up. Maybe if I did, it would be a little smoother, but it'll still drop shut on a good shake. So that's not a huge issue for me. You can see he's got big proprietary pivots. Yeah, he does make a specialized tool for these, but I imagine a coin would suffice to do the job, similar to my Shiragorovs. That's what I do with them. Moving on to the clip, we briefly talked about how his logo's in there, but it's also just a very minimal clip, but super functional. It's kind of like Spyderco. You got this big kind of tongue tongue tab, whatever you want to call it, that just really provides a very easy ramp for any material that you're going to have in your pants, or, you know, if you're clipping this guy in your backpack. Even if it's really big, you can see this huge, it's got a very big accommodation for whatever kind of material you would be slotting this guy into. Back spacer is similarly textured, or finished with kind of the bronze look. It's pretty aggressive jimping. You know, function, not a huge function. You know, it's good. This knife's gonna stay in the palm of your hand, not really, regardless of the jimping that he's put on here. The blade, the flipper tab has a little jimping, but again, it's big, so you know you're not gonna really have a hard time flipping it out. The blade also has some pretty significant jimping, which is nice. Also, the construction of the handle, even though this guy is a little on the small side for me, my hands fit perfectly in the handle, and this forward finger choil also is very comfortable to use and would be great for any kind of fine cutting movements that I would need to do with this knife. Aesthetically, you know, finishes aside, I think this knife is very utilitarian. It's very simple. There's not a lot of flair. The construction is extremely simple. You know, there's 2 body screws and 1 pivot, which is pretty standard. You've got a back spacer, and that's it. There's no, I mean, the back spacer is very small. It's pretty open in the back. It's obvious that these knives are made for utility purposes. You know, he does do some dressier versions with nicer materials and Dame steel and all that usual jazz, but just these basic ones, I could see these being very befitting of hard use. The stonewashed finish on the blade will hide wear very well. The blade stock is very thick. I don't have a measurement on here, but you know, it's at least probably 1/4 of an inch. Well, probably less than that, but it's very sizable compared to some other knives, especially the usual EDC favorites, like the Bug Out or whichever knife you're thinking of. But very nice construction, very solid, no blade play whatsoever. This thing's built like a tank. There's no internal milling, so the weight of the full titanium construction is felt. This guy weighs 6 ounces, which is kind of wild, given how small it is. The overall length is only 7.25 inches, which usually I would shy away from, but that's just what it is. So, handle length 4.5, blade length 3.25. Again, spec wise, it's a little small for me, but it's the handle is very wide. It's beefy. Even though it's small, it fits in the hand well, fills out the hand. Lengthwise, you can see that the bottom of the knife is pretty much encompassed by my hands, unless, you know, I choke up here. In that case, it pokes out a little bit more. But it's not terribly thick, actually, in the handle, so it fits well in the pocket. The one thing that the flipper tab is very big, and so that's the only thing I have not been super jazzed about with this knife, is that, you know, when it's sitting in your pocket, and I carry my phone and my knife in the same pocket, and so I usually have wide enough pockets, but, you know, even in jeans, this flipper tab juts out a lot, and the knife is already very wide at its core, and so having this flipper tab jut out another, you know, 1/3 of an inch it's noticeable. You're gonna feel it in your pocket. But other than that, I really like the construction. I like the design. I've actually raffled this guy off, so this video might be a little hasty or not as in-depth as usual because I've got to ship it out today. But I raffled it off to cover for another purchase, which I'll show you in just a second as a size comparison. But given that this guy is going to be leaving my collection, I am actually really looking forward to getting another one. I think I would rather have a large, the F3 large. The medium is nice, but again, you know, honestly in price they're not that different. The medium and the large. The medium, this guy was between like $600 and $700, I believe, when it was new. The larges are, you know, between $600 and $800, depending on the materials and milling and all that jazz. But I definitely like this guy. One other thing that I don't like is that you can see there are very small Lockbar cutout, or I don't know, not the Lockbar cutout, but I don't know what to call this, just to make it easier to get your thumb in there to disengage the Lockbar. I would have liked to see a little bit of a bigger one, or maybe some chamfers, because this guy doesn't have a lot of chamfering on the interior sides, which, you know, you're still going to touch, you're still going to feel them, even though they're not as prominent as, you know, the outside ones, which they do have very nice jimping on the outside of the scales, or excuse me, chamfering. But I would have liked to see some more chamfering, or at least a bigger Lockbar cutout to disengage the Lockbar on this guy. But anyway, I am not with my collection right now, so the only size comparison I can give you is the new purchase that I have sold this guy to fund, which is Marfione Custom Combat Interceptor, which I'll be doing a video on in the near future. But this guy's full carbon fiber front scale, and it does have the Marfione Interceptor blade, which is sick, putting it nicely. So, but if you have a Combat Troodon, you know this is the same size as a regular Combat Troodon, and you know, without the glass breaker, handle-wise, realistic grip area is comparable to the F3 if you use the forward choil. Otherwise, it's got about an inch on it. Blade-wise, they're not too dissimilar. Overall blade length, they're probably fairly close. You can see that the Interceptor cutting edge is a little bit longer, and also because the forward choil on the F3 is fairly sizable, so that takes away a decent amount of edge that you could possibly have. Also, it's a warm cliff, so that is gonna, you know, take away some of the blade, the edge length in this guy, and just how it's built. But yeah, so if you have a Combat Troodon, this should hopefully give you a good estimation of size, but not everybody does. So that's the best size comparison I can do here, unless I pulled out like a pen or something, which I'd rather just stick with knives for my size comparison, even if it's not the most apt description. So yeah, I think we've gone through all the specs of this guy. This one does have CPM S35 VN blade, which, if that matters to you, there you go. The weight is hefty, pushing 6 ounces, with no milling, full titanium construction, and a decent blade with stock. I guess the only area that it's shed weight is the pocket clip, so there you go. But yeah, this has been the Curtis Custom Knives F3 Medium.